Hey. So I have just taken a photo of the dice roll, which ideally I'd like to be able to do live, but I haven't worked out how to do that yet with the live streaming stuff, camera on the desk looking down at the dice or whatever. So I have taken a photo, which I'm going to old school send to myself via email, and then chuck up on the bottom of the screen here. Bear with me. I also have to be careful because I'm streaming this document here, which is what I'm going to be working off today. But it would be very easy for me to accidentally, forget that I'm streaming this and then open a new tab and do things that you are not supposed to see on that tab for the whole world. So if I do that, a little bit of warning or a little bit of notification wouldn't be shunned, I suppose. Let's see. Let's get this in. Oh, yes. Alright, downloading that. Cool. Let's see if this works. Rotation. Nope, wrong one. This guy. Alright, there we go. It's not amazing, but it'll do. What do we have here? Looks like some sort of alien. And some sort of flame, and then I know that that's pretty small. It looks to me, and obviously you are free to make it whatever you like in your writing, but it looks to me like that is a bridge of some sort. Bridge over some sort of body of water. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one for you guys. Let's see. I got 13 minutes before I'm officially going live. So if you found this stream already, hi, welcome to the Storia Writers Club. But I'm not really going to be jumping up and down, doing a little bit of last minute prep until 3 o'clock. Still, welcome. Get comfortable. Make yourself a coffee. We're in for the long haul, 2 hours. With no breaks. 0 breaks. You are not allowed to leave your desk or wherever you're watching this. Let's chuck that here. This is kind of cool. I like this. I mean, I'm not going to be able to hear much of anything while I'm here, unless I'm wearing these headphones, which I don't really want to be. I have very little lead length. So I can't really move my head more than this, or else I'm gonna ruin the whole thing. Yeah. I think I fucked up the eye line because I'm going to be looking this way at writing. Maybe if I just swap streams. That's a little better. Let's get rid of this. Hello, friends, countrymen, fellow writers. This is the first ever Storia Writers Club. Hold on, I'm just trying to do like 7 things at once, and I will get better at this, I'm sure. At the moment, I'm terrible at it. Let's see. Why can I not hear anything? Let's just make sure I am rolling to you guys with audio. Weird. Cool, everything sounds good. Right. So, this, as I mentioned in the introduction video, which if you haven't seen, it's probably a good idea for you to watch, and is on my channel. This is a live stream of me, Matthew Worboys, host of the podcast Storia, making 2 hours of time out of my day to write, to sit down and write, because I have found, just in my own life, that I'm bad at it. I think of these stories and I want to write, and they always kind of get big and get exciting, but I put off the writing process for no good reason. Because when I do it, it feels awesome. Like when I finish a story and I've got it back, and I read it back, I feel this like sense of accomplishment, this major sense of pride. And yet I only do it, a big project, maybe once a year or every couple of years. There was a period of time between screenplays that I wrote. I didn't write anything for like 2 or 3 years, which is weird because I call myself a writer. I've wanted to be a writer since I can remember, like late primary school, I think. But I just don't do it, which is it's a weird thing to do. So anyway, this week I'm going to be working on part 2 of my most recent episode of Storia, entitled Upper Management. Part 1 is already out and you can listen to that. I released it as a podcast. But I'm currently a couple of lines, I guess, into part 2. So for the next 2 hours, I will be working on that. But for the most part, I expect a lot of you guys will come to this not having a project that they're necessarily working on. And if that's the case, I thought I would also provide a writing prompt every week to get you guys working on stuff that is not necessarily about the story, or it doesn't start out as about the story, but is more about just getting into the habit of unpacking ideas, getting those creative juices flowing, and then not only the project dying there, but you're getting at least 2 hours of work on that project. So what I want to do ideally is roll. Hold on, let me see if I can find them. So I have bought these story dice. They are dice with just prompts on each face, and I thought it would be cool to roll a couple of them every week, and then have you guys use them as a prompt. I haven't worked out how to film that process, so I prepared a roll beforehand, which I'm just going to chuck up on screen now. There you go. Those were the 3 dice rolls that came about. So use them how you will for the next 2 hours. Again, for those just joining, I'm probably going to be working on part 2 of Upper Management, the latest Storia episode. Part 1 is already live, and I am deathly behind on part 2, so I'm going to be doing that for the next 2 hours. If you would like to follow along as I write this, obviously you can see on the screen I have shared the page of the Google Doc that I've been working out of. But I have also added into the description of this live stream a link to this document. Obviously, it's going to be read only. Well, fingers crossed, it's going to work as read only for anyone who wants to read along. But that's there as a resource for you if you're interested in what I'm writing. But ultimately, this is not really about me, not really about what I'm writing. I just wanted to, come and meet you guys and give you an excuse to do some writing. Cool. So I'm 6 minutes into this too, I think, which is good. I have ice water, and I have extremely large and extremely strong cup of coffee. So I'm pretty much good to go, and I hope you guys are too. I also recommend checking on some music, some writing music, something without lyrics is what works for me. Obviously, I'm not going to play it on the live stream for two reasons. The first being that I don't want to get sued, and I want to make sure that this live stream doesn't get taken down for rights reasons. But secondly, don't want to be annoying. Choose your own music. Cool. So as you can see there are the prompts, and I'm going to shut up starting now. Before I do that, before I get into it, there is a chat on the YouTube page, which hopefully makes a noise when someone chats. And if you have any questions, or if you just want to talk about your story, feel free to do so there. Cool. Love you guys. Have a good write. Alright guys, that is 30 minutes in to our 2-hour session. So I figured let's take a break. Go get a drink or go to the bathroom. How's it going? How's everyone's stories? Hopefully you feel some sort of inspiration from the writing prompt. I haven't really been paying too much attention to it. As you can see, I've been working on my own thing. But I mean, there's so much potential with those three things. I mean, my take is the first one, Dice 1, obviously looks like some sort of alien. But I find a lot of the time when dealing with writing prompts that the actual text of what's on the dice is sometimes not as good when thinking of ideas or saying what about those ideas interests you. So, you know, obviously the text of Dice 1 is alien. Or maybe it's a mask. I don't know. It is whatever you want it to be. It's a guitar pick with a face on it. But to me, it's an alien. But then obviously you take that one step further. The text is an alien. So what themes do you think about when you think about aliens? Immigration, feelings of alienation, being in a place that you don't understand, all that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's Dice 1. Dice 2 looks like some sort of flame. So again, how are we going to take this? Are you going to incorporate a flame into your story or some sort of fire? Or are you going to take it, maybe not one step further is the wrong way to look at it, but you kind of want to, you want to make it a bit more of an analogy or make it a bit more of a theme, maybe. So, you know, you need a rising tension, or you need to light a fire under your protagonist's butt. So, you know, does your protagonist need to be more active? What situation, what circumstance can you put your protagonist in that makes it not a steady walk to the end of the story, but actually, you know, gives some heat, gives some energy to the story, and gives it an end point. That's the kind of stuff I think about with Dice 2. Dice 3, as I said at the start of this, it looks to me like a bridge over some sort of body of water. So whether you incorporate bridge or a body of water into your story is up to you. For me, that kind of brings up ideas of like connection, or some sort of mending of differences, some sort of man-made creation to deal with a conflict, or to deal with some sort of complication in a story, you know, the ingenuity of a main character, perhaps. Yeah, lots of different ideas. Yes. So, as you can see from my story, I don't know if you have had a chance to look up Storia on your podcatcher of choice. It's available on iTunes and Podbean and all these different ones. This is Storia 4 that I'm working on. There have been 3 full episodes before, or 3 full stories broken up into different episodes. This one is probably the most lighthearted of the ones that I have worked on. What to say about it? So the main character is a person named Dawn. Dawn works in an office, but it seems, you know, I'm trying to slowly build into this story the idea that there's something ethereal about this office. You know, it doesn't have a lot of specifics, which is something that I would steer away from generally in a story, because, you know, specificity is a good thing in stories. It seems like the antithesis of creating a story that an audience can be empathetic with. is to make specifics, but it actually works the other way. That the more granular that you get, generally speaking, the more empathy an audience can feel for that character. But that is not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is trying desperately to keep everything very general, because I want to slowly make the reader or the listener realize that there are no specifics for the characters, that it is all very bland, that they seem to not have any sort of personality of their own. But really what Dawn and Ari and Michael and all of these manager characters are doing is controlling someone else's personality, or controlling is not the right way to be talking about it, but they're actively affecting a reality that has color, that has texture, whereas this office that they seem to be stuck in has no texture, has no color. They are only there to perform the tasks that the people upstairs tell them to do. So that's kind of why I'm going for in the language that I'm choosing to use to describe the office. So yes, Dawn is a character, an office, a manager is the term, the job description that I've given her. Manager of a client at a client level, and basically every day she gets these deliveries of blue and red cards, and her job is to overlook the life of a human. In this case, Dawn's human. Dawn's human is named Bill, and she's kind of like the guardian angel. Whenever Bill has a situation, whenever Bill has a decision to make, these cards get delivered with all the different options that Dawn can choose to play. When she plays the cards, that decision incorporates itself into this life, the life of this human that's on Earth, basically. Yeah. I hate talking about my stories rather than just writing them. I'm bad at it. But I mean, it's kind of what I'm here to do, besides writing. So the idea, and obviously if you've clicked on this doc, you'll see that there's a lot of planning. The whole story is kind of down there in dot points, as you can see. And that's kind of what I like to do before I get down to the writing process. I think of, generally when I think of a story, I think of the conceit first, is generally how it works. And the conceit here is there is this group of people who don't have lives of their own, that they work in this mysterious office, and they have power over their clients, humans. Each human is assigned a manager, and the manager's job is to make sure that the human's levels of happiness and just general succeeding in life, their achievements. The manager's job is to make sure that those levels can be as high as possible. So that's the conceit, and I came up with that first. It's just these conceits kind of just come out of nowhere. Maybe I'm inspired by another piece of art that I'm consuming, or like I'm in the shower or going for a walk, and I think, hey, wouldn't this be weird? So that's where this stuff starts. Then after I think through the conceit, I start thinking about characters and relationships and what the conceit would do to how people talk. What are all of the characters, what shade of the conceit does each character represent? So then I think of a bunch of characters, and I think about, the conceit is only part one of the story. The conceit isn't the whole story. the story needs to have, you know, an event, characters, an action. It needs to have a conclusion. The conceit needs to be the starting point, not the ending point. At least the way that I do it. So how do the characters who live inside the conceit, what's their story? It's kind of what it's kind of the next step in creating this narrative. So now that I have the conceit, I have a couple of characters. I have generally like character arcs through the progression of a story. I start writing it down. I start breaking it down into plot beats, basically. And whether that comes in fully formed scene ideas, it depends. A lot of the times I think we need to get to this moment. You know, in this situation, I know that I needed to get my characters, I needed to get the client's Bill onto a train to meet Lucy's client, which I haven't gotten to the details of yet as I'm writing it, but we'll get there. So I knew I needed to get to a train scene. I knew I needed to get to the end of the story where Dawn decides that she wants to break this cycle of a lack of free will, and that's basically what this story is about. Is about the like a tussle between predestination and free will. In that, while it seems that there is some sort of element of free will, with Dawn choosing which cards to play, she realizes that the whole thing is rigged, and basically her role is nothing. She's a middle manager that is kind of just like representationally playing cards, making decisions, but really it's the kind of cards that are being chosen that are supposed to be random, but the kinds of flights of fate that she's been given, that is what is choosing the way of her client's life. Yeah. Cool. Ugh. Back to it, guys. I'm afraid you uh, may see some awful spelling if you're following along with this writing that I'm doing. What I'm trying and struggling to do with this section is there's a lot of exposition, and there's two major events in this scene, which I both want to get through as quickly as possible because it's not exciting. The drama isn't that interesting, but I don't want to get through them so quickly that these two events, we're like waffling over these two events. So the two events are the reveal of the golden card, which comes into play obviously later in the story, and then the second event is the winner of the golden card, which happens just straight away, just right now. I wonder whether ideally I should have brought up the golden card earlier in part 1, just mentioned it, so that these two reveals don't feel like I've just pushed them together, you know? But there's not a lot I can do about that because part 1 has already been released. Because that's not the end of the scene either. So there's the reveal of the golden card. Then there's the reveal that that Michael wins the golden card. But then there's a third thing which happens still in the scene, but this is the real thing that sets up the rest of the story, which is the introduction of Lucy. Because as an experiment, upper management upstairs has decided to try out a new situation where Michael's client and his girlfriend, the manager of Michael's client's girlfriend, is going to be brought in to this workplace so that Michael and this other manager can work together to kind of like synergize how they're playing for their two clients, which has never been done before, but is going to be done here as an experiment. And we later find that it's not as simple as that Lucy has made some enemies upstairs and is kind of just like being demoted to this, and they didn't really have a place to put her, but also her role is very important in the kind of like fateful outcomes of Bill. We'll get to that. So that's what I'm trying to do here. How's your writing going, everyone? The other thing to know here is this is a rough draft. This is like draft 1, and I am expecting, obviously, you guys are working on draft 1s, unless you're not. Unless you're working on a rewrite, which is cool. You're more than welcome to do that. But for me, a big challenge is I sometimes overwrite, try and get the first draft to be perfect. Because when I finish a draft, my desire to tell the story just plummets. I don't know why. but it's just the way that it happens. I feel like I've told the story, and so I quite often have to leave a story that I've finished a draft of in a drawer until that desire kind of rises again. And sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it does 10 years later, which is another project that I'm working on. It has been revitalized because I wrote the first draft of a 90-page feature screenplay 6 years ago, and once it was done, put it in a drawer, forgot about it, did nothing with it because it was not very good. The feedback that I got was not very good. But then all of a sudden, just recently, that screenplay has come back into my brain, thinking about ideas of. It's weird because when I first wrote draft one, there was these conceits that and constraints that I liked at the time, that I wanted everything to be done in one location over a weekend. And I wrote to those constraints, and at the time I could not break those constraints without losing the interest of the story. I felt like I was losing the authenticity of the idea, the rawness of it. And so I wrote potentially what was subpar work, trying to fit it into these constraints about it all happening in one house over 3 days. But then 6 or 7 years later, as I look back and I think about the story, I realized that the constraints that I put myself under are not interesting to me anymore. The characters are still interesting. The relationships, the drama, the conflicts, all of that stuff, I feel like there's value there. But the actual constraints were just man-made. I wanted it to be this kind of story, and it became that kind of story, but it didn't serve the value of the other elements to do that. So now when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about similar drama, but heightening it, tightening it, and I can do that if I just get rid of the constraints. So I will probably be working on that at some point in the future. I don't know, maybe I make it a lottery. Because at the moment, the idea is like success begets success, or the people with privilege are rewarded with more privilege. It's kind of what I'm going for, but that's very in the foreground. And I think that that idea is supposed to be a little bit masked. I want it to live a little bit deeper under the surface of the story. Okay, so if Ari and Dawn are under the impression that anyone could win this golden card, that it's this kind of like stimulus. Yeah, I kind of like that. What do I lose? I mean, obviously it doesn't change the outcome. Then Michael wins it because, again, it's all rigged. And so that privilege begetting privilege idea is still there. Yeah, I'll give that a go. Why not? I think this section here, I think it lessens the effectiveness of the golden card, the reveal of the golden card, which is kind of a good thing actually, because you don't want like pow 100% big reveal golden card, pow 100% reveal Michael wins it, pow 100% strength reveal that Lucy is joining the office. There's like three big things, so I think you kind of want the golden card to be more of a basis for the second reveal. That's what I'm trying. Or at least that's how it's coming out. But that's something to tweak in a second draft. I'm terrible at tenses, sticking in a tense. Quite often I will change tenses of stories as I'm writing it. At the moment this is in present tense, but who knows? Who knows? I like present tense because it feels it feels present, I suppose. It feels like there is a natural energy to the intrigue. But we'll see. All right, dudes, break time. Last break of this first session. It is 4:30, so we have 30 minutes left of writing before we call it a day. for this live stream. Yeah, how's it going? I would love to read some of your stories. And actually, this is probably a good time to mention the idea that I had incorporating some of your guys' creative writing into Storia. Um, if you write something in these sessions based on the writing prompt story dice that I've provided, and you like it and you want it to be featured on an episode of Storia, please send it along to storiacast@gmail.com. Obviously, it needs to be within a certain amount of words. Let's say between 500 and 5,000 words. And obviously, it won't necessarily make it onto the show. But if you send something that I like, then yeah. Then I would love to record a narrative version of it and chuck it out on the Storia feed. And that'd be cool. Plus, it adds content to Storia, which, as you can see, episodes are few and far between because I'm a bad writer and writing is hard. But hopefully they speed up a little bit as we go. So I obviously haven't gotten through as much as I would have liked to in this 2 hours, but the point is that I have written something, that I sat down, and worked out just a little bit, even a couple of words. There's progress. It's towards the end. It's better than just thinking about the story endlessly, going over the same thing over and over again in your head and not getting anything down, because that's not making progress towards having the story in a represented in a way that can be enjoyed by other people. And having a story in your head that's just for you is one thing, but a narrative doesn't have life until it can be communicated and transferred from one person to another. It's like Chinese whispers or whatever they call that game these days. You want to you pack stories with so much of yourself and so many of the themes that you're interested in and how you see the world. And that's good, but there's like a level there, this is a one human experience's level of meaning. But then as soon as you communicate it to someone else, that kind of doubles the meaning, because another person hearing it is going to bring to that telling their own worldview and their own themes. So that's why I think every story needs to be told to someone, not necessarily to their face, but stories only exist when they're being communicated. And that's something to think about. All right, back to it. We've got another 30 minutes. Let's push this to the end. Let's get a couple more paragraphs out of us. We can do this. I need some music. I sometimes, when I feel like my creative energy is diminished for a second as I finish a sentence or whatever, like to just get a word count. I think it's vestigial from my like schooling days where I had to hit a word count. For this, there's no minimum or maximum, although like, you know, you want to make it as snappy as possible. But I'm always just curious. There's also a part of me that kind of wants every segment that I break a story or episode up into to be roughly the same length, which I'm gonna fail desperately with this one. Part 2 is going to be a lot longer than part 1. Part 1 is 2,500 words. Part 2, I'm only up to 800 words, whatever that was. But this is like this is dot point 1 of part 2. I have to get better at that. I have to get a better sense of like how much of a beat a part of a story is going to be, how much writing is it going to take to fully express the idea and lay the seeds, you know, for stuff that's coming up later. I know that for my last Storia episode, All the World is Green, originally it was supposed to be 3 parts. And then I got to the end of 2 and I realized that the part 3 was going to be huge, you know, 3 times as long as part 1 and part 2. And I had this entire like secondary story that I felt needed to be told, which was just going to make part 3 even longer. So I separated it into 4 parts. I made part 3 exclusively from the perspective of the secondary character, which I liked, and it kind of like evened out the story in a nice way. But and then I got to writing part 4, and despite me breaking up part 4 into 2 parts, part 4 turned out to be either way about 3 times as long as the other parts. So I really stuffed the timing of that one up. You know, it's like part 1 is 20 minutes long, part 2 is 25 minutes long, part 3 is 20 minutes long, and then part 4 is like an hour long. So hopefully I can separate these a little more evenly. But obviously, like, the goal is to structure these episodes a little bit like TV, where every part ends on a good note, on a note looking forward, with some sort of interesting beat, interesting twist, you know, some sort of cliffhanger. You don't just want to get to the end of a sentence and kind of peter out at the end of a part. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. So, you know, I've organized the parts in this planning section where to break up the different parts, based on where kind of like the big punches are in the story. Whether that means that they're going to be equally spaced, I don't know. I doubt it. All right, guys. The time is 4:57, which means we have 3 minutes before this live stream finishes. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining me. I got a fair chunk of this scene done in this last 2 hours. Like 2 beats of it, which is good, which is way better than I would have done by not writing it all today. So I'm happy. I'm happy with this outcome. How did your story end up? Did you get through a lot of it? Did you just scaffold it and plan to write it later, maybe next week? Or did you finish it and now you're gonna go through and write a second version or edit it together? I would absolutely love to read what you guys came up with, whether you did it now or whether you watch this later. So please send along what you came up with to storiacast@gmail.com. And if I get a chance to read it, I will gladly give you some feedback and tell you how good it is, because I'm sure it will be awesome. Thank you again so much for joining me. And please do not forget to check out my anthology fiction storytelling podcast called Storia. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Podbean, or on any podcatching app that you use. It is a place for me to just put my writing out, and also for me to kind of learn how to produce audio. I've had a really amazing time working on Storia, and it will continue for the foreseeable future. I have no plans to ever stop doing it. But I need more listeners. I need more people to be hearing my stories. Yeah. StoriaCast@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys next week, Sunday, 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. On this page, I'll set up an announcement beforehand before I go live, but I will be here, and I hope you are too. Have a really good week, guys. Thanks a lot.